I had to move out to a rented place 'cause my parents threatened to give away my room without even telling me. They got mad and hit me when I said no. But then, bam! The doorbell rang, and I never thought I'd be posting here, but honestly, I feel like I'm losing my mind, and I need some outside perspective. I'm 28, male, and I've always thought I had a decent relationship with my family. At least, that's what I believed. Lately, though, things have taken a sharp turn, and now I'm questioning everything. Let me break it down for you. Last weekend, I decided to visit my parents. It had been a few months since my last trip home, not because of any big drama or anything, but life's been hectic, and honestly, I've enjoyed having my own space. Mom, though, had been blowing up my phone, constantly texting about how much she missed me, and Dad piled on the guilt with his family is everything mantra. Eventually, I caved and made the 3-hour drive. When I got there, everything seemed fine at first. Mom greeted me like she hadn't seen me in years, practically crushing me with one of her signature bear hugs. Dad gave me his usual, "Glad you're here, kid," and a firm nod. My sister Harper, she's 34, was there too, along with her 3 kids, Chloe, Mason, both 6, and Olivia, 4. The kids were doing their usual thing, running wild in the living room like tiny, chaotic tornadoes. Harper's husband, Ryan, wasn't there though. She said he had work stuff. After all the hellos, I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs to my old room, planning to drop my stuff and maybe chill for a few minutes. But when I opened the door, I stopped cold. My room was gone. Well, not gone, but it had been completely transformed. Everything, my bed, my desk, my shelves, was replaced. Now it was this brightly colored playroom, complete with little chairs, a dollhouse, a mountain of toys, and even a plastic slide. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd walked into the wrong room, but nope, it was definitely my old space. I turned and yelled down the stairs, Mom? What happened to my room?" She came up, looking a little annoyed, like I just asked her why the sun sets. "Oh, honey, we turned it into a playroom for the kids. They needed the space. Isn't it cute?" I couldn't even respond right away. My brain was scrambling to catch up. Finally, I managed to ask, "So, where am I supposed to sleep?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we set up the pull-out couch in the den for you. It's cozy." She said cozy like it was a selling point, all cheerful, as if that would somehow make me forget that my entire childhood room had been wiped off the map without anyone giving me a heads up. Trying to stay calm, I asked, "When did this happen?" She hesitated, just for a second, then said, "Oh, a couple of months ago. Harper thought it would be nice for the kids to have their own space when they visit." Harper. Of course. My sister has a knack for taking over whatever she wants and making it sound like she's doing everyone else a favor. Right on cue, she showed up at the top of the stairs holding Olivia and gave me this big, innocent grin. "Don't be mad, Noah," she said, her voice all sweet and syrupy, like she was trying to charm me out of being upset. She hit me with that faux sweet tone she always uses when she knows she's about to tick me off. "The kids love it. And you're not here that much anyway, right?" I didn't bother responding. I just nodded and walked back downstairs, but inside? I was fuming. It wasn't about the room itself. I'm not some weirdo who's overly sentimental about a bed frame. It was the principle of the thing. They didn't even tell me. It felt like they decided I didn't matter enough to deserve a heads up. Dinner that night was tense, to say the least. I tried to shake off my irritation, but I guess it showed, because Harper couldn't resist making her little digs. "So, Noah, how's the single life?" she asked, smirking like she couldn't wait to get under my skin. She knew I'd broken up with my girlfriend a few months ago. "Bet you're enjoying all that free time, huh?" Before I could respond, Mom jumped in. "Oh, Harper, leave him alone. Noah's always been independent. He's not in a rush to settle down." Harper gave me one of her patronizing smiles, the kind that makes your teeth clench. "Well, it's good you're not tied down. I mean, if you had a family, it'd be hard to find room for everyone here, you know." It hit like a slap in the face. She was clearly rubbing it in. Her family got more space while I got downgraded to the pull-out couch. Dad tried to change the subject by talking about football, but honestly, I barely tasted my food. By the time dessert rolled around, I'd had enough. I set my fork down and cleared my throat. "Can I ask something?" I said, my voice tight. Why didn't anyone bother to tell me about the room? Like, even just a text. Mom sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Honey, you're hardly ever here." It just made sense. "Yeah, but it's still my room, or it was," I shot back, looking between her and Dad. "I don't even care about the room itself. It's the fact that no one thought I deserved a heads up." Harper rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, come on, Noah. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a room." That word, dramatic, was the final straw. I stood up, trying my best to keep my cool. "It's not just a room. It's about respect. And right now, I feel like I don't have any in this house." The table went dead silent. Even the kids, who'd been buzzing around like usual, seemed to pick up on the tension. After a moment, Dad muttered something about how I was overreacting, and Mom started gathering plates like the conversation was already over. I couldn't sit there another second. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "I'm going for a walk," I said, not looking back. As I stomped down the driveway, the cool night air hit me, but it didn't do much to calm me down. My mind was spinning. Was I really overreacting, or had my family finally shown me just how little they valued me? I wandered aimlessly for a while, the quiet streets offering nothing but more space to think. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. Harper's smug little comments didn't help. Eventually, I found myself at the local park, the place I used to go when I needed to clear my head as a kid. I sat down on one of the old benches, staring at the swings swaying gently in the breeze. The anger hadn't disappeared, but at least I could breathe a little. The park wasn't anything fancy, just a small patch of grass with a few benches and some swings. It was the kind of place we used to hang out at as kids, back when life felt a lot simpler. I picked a bench near the swings and sat down, staring at nothing in particular, trying to get my thoughts in order. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Jack, my best friend since middle school. We don't talk every day, but whenever we do, it's like no time has passed. He's always been that kind of friend. Figuring he'd be a good person to vent to, I hit the call button. Jack picked up on the second ring. "Noah. What's up, man? Long time." "Hey," I said, trying not to sound as defeated as I felt. "You busy?" "For you. Never." "What's going on?" I let it all spill out, the surprise playroom, Harper's digs at dinner, and my parents brushing off my feelings. By the time I finished, Jack was practically fuming on my behalf. "Wait, they just took your room? Without even giving you a heads up?" His voice climbed an octave in disbelief. "That's so messed up." "Right," I said, feeling a weird sense of relief. Finally, someone who understood. But apparently, I'm the dramatic one for being upset about it. Jack let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you are. That's how families work, guilt trips and gaslighting, all tied up in a neat little package called love." I chuckled dryly. "So, what do I even do? Push back and they'll just double down and make me out to be the bad guy?" Jack didn't sugarcoat it. "Yeah, probably. But dude, you're not wrong to feel pissed. They basically erased you from the house, like you don't even matter anymore." That hit harder than I expected, probably because it was exactly how I felt. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's like I don't count." "You do count," Jack said, his tone firm. "Don't let them make you think otherwise, Noah. You've got every right to be upset." After we hung up, I felt a little better. At least someone was in my corner. But as I walked back to the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the room. It felt bigger, like this was just the tip of the iceberg. My family had always catered to Harper. It wasn't exactly a new thing, but this felt like a whole new level. When I walked back in, the house was quiet. The kids were already in bed, and Harper was nowhere to be seen. I found Mom in the kitchen, washing dishes. She glanced at me but didn't say anything. "Mom," I said, leaning against the counter, "can we talk?" She sighed like she'd been expecting this. "If it's about the room, Noah, I don't know what else to say. It's done." The kids needed the space. "It's not just about the room," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "It's about how you made this decision without even considering how I might feel. It's like I don't matter." Mom put down the dish she was scrubbing and turned to face me, her expression softening a little. "Of course you matter, Noah. Don't be ridiculous. You're my son. Then why does it feel like Harper's kids are more important than me?" The words spilled out before I could stop them. Her face changed, softening for a moment, but then she shook her head. "Noah, that's not fair. Harper has 3 kids. They're young, and they need space to play. You're an adult. You don't even live here anymore," Mom said, cutting me off before I could respond. "Look, I know it's hard to see it from our perspective, but this house has to work for everyone. You're not here most of the time. Harper's kids are." It just made sense. A lump rose in my throat, and I swallowed it down hard. "Right. Makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up," I said flatly, turning to walk away before I said something I'd regret. I didn't wait for her to respond. I couldn't. If I stayed, I knew I'd blow up, and that wouldn't solve anything. The next morning, I was jerked awake by the sound of the kids yelling and thundering down the hallway. The pull-out couch in the den was about as comfortable as a bed of rocks, and my back wasn't shy about reminding me of that fact. My mood wasn't any better than it had been the night before. I made myself a cup of coffee and went outside to the porch, hoping for a few moments of quiet. The cool morning air helped a little, but I still felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. That's when Ellie, our next-door neighbor and longtime family friend, came over. Ellie's been around for as long as I can remember, a no-nonsense kind of woman in her early 50s who somehow always knows when something's up. "Hey, Noah," she said, leaning on the porch railing. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Yeah," I said, forcing a weak smile. "Been busy." She gave me her signature no BS look. "You doing okay? You seemed pretty upset last night." I sighed, knowing there was no point trying to brush her off. "You heard that, huh?" She shrugged. "Thin walls. Besides, it's not hard to tell when something's bothering you." I hesitated for a second, but decided to spill. Ellie's always been good at cutting through the noise, and I figure her perspective couldn't hurt. So, I laid it all out for her, the surprise playroom, Harper's digs, and how my parents brushed me off like my feelings didn't matter. When I finished, she frowned. "That's rough, kid. I don't blame you for being upset. They should have told you." "Right. That's all I'm saying," I said, feeling validated for once. "But they're acting like I'm the bad guy for even bringing it up." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Harper's always been persuasive. She knows how to get what she wants, especially from your parents." I snorted. "Yeah, tell me about it." She hesitated for a moment, like she wasn't sure if she should keep going. Then she asked, "Did she ever tell you about the deal she made with them?" I frowned. "What deal?" Ellie shifted her weight, her tone careful. "When she first asked them to turn your room into a playroom, they said no. Your mom was worried about how you'd feel. But Harper convinced them by saying it would just be temporary, only while the kids were little." My jaw tightened. "Temporary? Nobody mentioned that part." Ellie shrugged. "I'm just telling you what I heard. But if you ask me, Harper never had any intention of giving that room back. She knows your parents hate confrontation. She probably figured you'd just let it go." I sat there, stunned. It made sense, too much sense. Harper had gone behind my back and manipulated our parents into making a decision that worked for her, all while pretending she had good intentions. "Thanks, Ellie," I said after a long pause. "I think I needed to hear that." She patted my shoulder with a small smile. "Anytime, kid. Just don't let em push you around, okay?" I nodded, but my mind was racing. Knowing the truth didn't make it hurt any less. If anything, it felt worse, like the betrayal had been confirmed in black and white. Ellie gave my shoulder a firm pat, her expression serious. "Anytime, kid. Just remember, you deserve better than this. Don't let them keep walking all over you." Her words echoed in my head as I stepped back inside. Harper was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with that irritating air of indifference, like nothing had happened. For a moment, I stood there, debating whether to confront her right then and there. My fists clenched involuntarily, but I forced myself to turn away. I needed time to get my thoughts in order. Blowing up now would just give her an excuse to paint me as the unreasonable one. I spent the rest of the day avoiding everyone, my frustration simmering just beneath the surface. I took a long walk through town, grabbed lunch by myself, and kept replaying everything Ellie had told me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Harper had manipulated my parents, lied to me, and had the audacity to act like I was the one overreacting. By the time I got back to the house, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to let this slide. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I found Harper in the living room. She was sprawled on the couch, sipping wine and staring at the TV like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat down across from her, locking eyes with her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. She glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "About what?" "The room," I said sharply. "And how you went behind my back to get Mom and Dad to give it to you." Her face didn't change, but I caught the smallest flicker of something. Annoyance? Guilt? Whatever it was, it vanished almost instantly. "I didn't go behind your back," she said, her voice irritatingly calm. "I just explained to Mom and Dad why it made sense. It's not my fault they agreed with me." "Really?" I said, leaning forward. "So, you didn't tell them it would just be temporary?" Her composure slipped for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see it. "I might have said that," she admitted, her tone dismissive. "But come on, Noah, you're barely here. Why does it matter so much to you?" "It matters," I snapped, my voice rising despite my efforts to keep it controlled, "because you lied to them. And to me. You made it seem like this was a done deal, like I didn't even have a say. Do you have any idea how much that stings?" Harper rolled her eyes, and it was all I could do not to yell. "Oh, please," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Don't turn this into some big, dramatic thing. It's just a room." That was it. "It's not just a room," I hissed, leaning forward. My voice dropped, low and tight. "It's about respect. And right now, I don't feel like I'm getting any, from you, or from Mom and Dad." She sighed heavily, like she couldn't believe I was still talking about this. "Look, Noah, I'm sorry you're upset, but this isn't about you. It's about the kids. They needed space, and you don't. End of story." Without waiting for my response, she stood up, grabbed her wineglass, and walked out of the room. Just like that. I sat there, staring at the empty doorway, my whole body tense with anger. She didn't care. She wasn't going to apologize or admit that she'd done anything wrong. To her, this was nothing more than an inconvenience she could brush off. As the silence settled around me, one thing became painfully clear. If I wanted to stand up for myself, I couldn't count on Harper, or anyone else in my family, to back me up. The next morning, I woke up on the same miserable pull-out couch, my back aching worse than the night before. The springs might as well have been stabbing me in my sleep. I sat up slowly, rubbing my temples, the frustration from the night before still gnawing at me. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to avoid the situation anymore. Letting Harper walk all over me wasn't an option. If she wanted to play games, I'd make sure I had the upper hand. I needed clarity. And if I was being honest, I needed leverage. I decided to go through the boxes of my old stuff. When Harper turned my room into a playroom, Mom had moved everything she considered mine into the garage. I hadn't seen any of it in years, but I figured it might be worth salvaging something. At the very least, it gave me an excuse to avoid everyone for a while. The garage was a disaster. Stacks of boxes, random pieces of furniture, and rusted yard equipment crammed into every corner. It was damp and musty, the kind of smell that makes you instinctively hold your breath. I found my things shoved in a moldy section near the back, stacked haphazardly against the wall. The sight made my stomach turn. Years of my life, memories I thought mattered, were stuffed into flimsy cardboard boxes like they were junk. I started sifting through them, trying to ignore the damp smell and the weight settling in my chest. Most of it was what I expected: dusty yearbooks, old video games, and a few sports trophies. Then I opened a box and froze. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Not just any letters. They were from Sophia, my ex-girlfriend. Sophia and I had dated for 3 years in college. She was my first real love, and while we'd broken up on good terms, I hadn't thought about her in years. Seeing her handwriting again felt like a gut punch. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading. The letters were sweet, full of inside jokes, future plans, and little notes about how much she adored my family. There were mentions of visiting my parents and how much she loved my mom's cooking. I'd forgotten how close she'd been to them. Then I found one letter that made my blood run cold. It was addressed to me, but scrawled on the back in handwriting I knew all too well was a note from Harper. Noah, you really shouldn't keep these. It's not healthy to dwell on the past. I was going to throw them out, but Mom said to leave it up to you. My hands shook as I stared at it. Harper had gone through my personal things, letters I hadn't even thought about in years, and decided she had the right to throw them away. And Mom knew. I shoved the letters back into the box, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about the room anymore. This was about how little respect Harper had for me, not just as a brother, but as a person. And worse, my parents had enabled her every step of the way. Later that afternoon, I found Mom in the kitchen making sandwiches for the kids. I set the box of letters down on the counter in front of her, my jaw tight. Mom, I said, keeping my voice as even as I could, can we talk about this? She glanced up, puzzled. What's that? These are letters from Sophia, I said, lifting the lid so she could see. I found them in one of the boxes in the garage. Did you know Harper was planning to throw them out? Her face flushed. Oh, honey, that was years ago. She didn't mean anything by it. She didn't mean anything by it? I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. She went through my personal stuff and decided what I should or shouldn't keep. And you let her? Mom sighed, setting down the bread knife. Noah, listen. Mom sighed and gave me a look that felt like pity, which only made the fire in my chest burn hotter. Noah, you were in a rough place after the breakup. Harper was just trying to help. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Help? By deciding what memories I'm allowed to keep. That's not help, Mom. That's control. Her face fell, guilt flickering in her eyes. Before she could respond, Harper strolled into the kitchen, a juice box in her hand, looking completely unbothered. What's going on? She asked casually, though her tone had a wary edge to it. I turned to her, holding up the letter with her note. Care to explain this? Harper glanced at it, her expression barely changing. Then she rolled her eyes. Oh, that. Noah, that was forever ago. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Because it's my stuff, I snapped. You had no right to go through it, let alone decide what to throw away. She shrugged like it was nothing. I was just trying to do you a favor. You were so hung up on Sophia back then. I thought it'd be better if you didn't have those reminders lying around. That wasn't your decision to make. I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Harper. And the fact that you think you do. That's the problem. Harper crossed her arms, her face twisting into an annoyed smirk. Oh, come on, Noah. You're overreacting. Again. Before I could fire back, Mom stepped between us, holding up her hands like a referee. Okay, that's enough. Both of you. But I wasn't done. No, Mom. It's not enough, I said, the words spilling out in a rush. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Harper gets away with everything because you and Dad let her. She walks all over me, and you expect me to just take it. That's not true, Mom said weakly, but the look on her face said otherwise. Harper let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly exasperated. You're acting like I'm some kind of villain, Noah. I'm sorry if you feel hurt, but I didn't do anything wrong. And honestly, maybe you should stop clinging to the past and start focusing on your future. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. You don't get to lecture me about my future, I said, my voice low and furious, when you can't even respect my present. I grabbed the box of letters and stormed out of the kitchen, ignoring Harper's sarcastic parting shot. Oh, here we go again. Noah always has to make everything about him. That night, I called Jack again and told him what had happened. I could practically hear him shaking his head on the other end of the line. Wow, he said after a long pause. Your sister sounds like a real piece of work. She's not usually this bad, I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. But it's like she can't stand the idea of me having anything that's mine. She has to control everything. Well, you can't let her, Jack said firmly. If you keep letting her push you around, she'll never stop. I know, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. But every time I try to stand up for myself, I'm the one who ends up looking like the bad guy. Jack was quiet for a moment, then he said, maybe it's time to stop worrying about what they think and start worrying about what's best for you." His words hit me like a brick. I sat there in silence long after we hung up, staring at the letters. For the first time, I wondered if I'd spent too much of my life trying to keep the peace, sacrificing my own boundaries for the sake of avoiding conflict. It was time to stop. For years, I'd twisted myself into knots to keep the peace with my family. I'd swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, and played along. But what had it gotten me? A playroom where my bedroom used to be. My memories stuffed into moldy boxes in the garage. And a sister who treated my life like something she had the right to control. I couldn't do it anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a single thought. No more. No more tiptoeing around. No more letting things slide. If my family wanted to act like my feelings didn't matter, fine, but they were going to hear the truth, loud and clear. Breakfast was a storm of chaos. Harper's kids screamed and argued over cereal while Mom tried, and failed, to mediate. Dad sat in the middle of it all, hidden behind his newspaper like a coward. Harper, as usual, was glued to her phone, detached from the whirlwind around her. I waited. The moment the kids dashed off to the playroom, I seized my chance. "We need to have a family conversation," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the kitchen. Harper barely looked up. "Can it wait?" "The kids." "No," I said sharply, my tone leaving no room for argument. "It can't." The weight of my voice pulled their attention. Mom's hand froze mid-reach for her coffee. Dad folded his paper, his jaw tightening. Harper sighed, dramatically rolling her eyes, but stayed put. I stood firm, grounding myself before the storm I was about to unleash. "I've been holding this in since I got here," I began, my voice cold but steady. "And it's been eating me alive. Over the past few days, I felt completely disrespected by this family. The room. The way Harper talks to me. The way you two," I gestured to Mom and Dad, "dismiss my feelings like they don't matter. I'm done pretending it's fine." Mom's mouth opened, a protest already forming, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Let me finish." I turned my full attention to Harper, the anger I'd buried for years clawing its way to the surface. "You took my room without asking," I said, my voice tight. "You went through my things without asking. And every single time I bring it up, you act like I'm crazy for being upset. Do you have any idea how humiliating that feels?" Harper leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with that trademark smirk that made my blood boil. "Oh my God, Noah, you're being so dramatic. It's a room. And those letters. That was years ago. Why are you even bringing it up now?" "Because it's not about the room," I snapped, my voice sharp enough to make Mom flinch. "It's about the pattern. You act like your needs, and your kids' needs, are the only ones that matter. And the worst part, Mom and Dad let you do it." Mom sat up straighter, her face tightening. "Harper doesn't get away with anything," she said defensively, her voice shaky. "We've made sacrifices for both of you." "Really?" I barked, my tone cutting. "Name one thing Harper's ever had to sacrifice." The room froze. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line as she looked helplessly at Dad, who suddenly found his coffee very fascinating. Harper, on the other hand, just smiled. Smug. Victorious. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "See? This is what I'm talking about. You bend over backward for her and her kids, but when it comes to me, I'm an afterthought. Always." "That's not true, Noah," Mom said, her voice trembling now. "We love you. We've always loved you." "Love isn't the issue, Mom," I cut in, my voice hard. "It's respect. And it's crystal clear that in this family, I don't have any." Mom's face crumpled, and for a fleeting second, I thought she might actually cry. "But Harper..." She let out a loud, exasperated sigh. "You're acting like I'm some kind of villain, Noah," she said, her tone dripping with irritation. "I'm sorry if you feel hurt, but I didn't do anything wrong. And honestly, maybe you should stop clinging to the past and start focusing on your future." My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "You don't get to lecture me about my future," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Not when you can't even respect my present." I grabbed the box of letters and stormed out of the kitchen. Harper, ever the queen of sarcasm, called after me. "Oh, here we go again. Noah making everything about him." I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I slammed the door to the den, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. That night, I called Jack. He picked up on the first ring. "Let me guess," he said. "Your sister's at it again." I let out a bitter laugh. "You don't even know the half of it." I recounted the whole confrontation, and when I was done, Jack let out a low whistle. "Dude," he said, "your sister sounds like a total nightmare." "She's not usually this bad," I muttered, though even I wasn't sure if I believed it anymore. "But it's like she can't stand the idea of me having anything that's mine. She has to control everything." "Well, here's the thing," Jack said firmly. "You can't let her. If you keep letting her walk all over you, she'll never stop." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. "But every time I stand up for myself, I end up looking like the bad guy." Jack was quiet for a moment before he said, "Maybe it's time to stop worrying about what they think and start worrying about what you need." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. 4 years, I've been trying to keep the peace. To keep them happy. But for the first time, I wondered if it was worth it. It was time to stop bending. "Why don't you ever show it?" I snapped, my voice cracking under the weight of my frustration. "Why don't you ever have my back when Harper pulls this crap?" "That's enough," Dad said sharply, finally lowering his newspaper to glare at me. "You're not a victim here, Noah. You're an adult. You need to grow up and stop making everything about yourself." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I just stared at him, struggling to process what he'd said. "I'm not making this about me," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "I'm asking for basic respect." "Is that really too much to ask?" Dad didn't answer. He just stared at me like I was some petulant child. Harper let out a dramatic sigh, pushing her chair back and standing. "You know what? This is a waste of time. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you whine about how hard your life is when you don't even have real responsibilities. Try raising 3 kids, Noah. Then you'll understand what hard actually means." I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "I'm not saying my life is harder than yours, Harper," I said, my voice tight with restrained anger. "I'm saying my life is valid. My feelings are valid. But clearly, none of you care." Harper shrugged, her face blank and dismissive. "Believe whatever you want. I'm done with this conversation." And just like that, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with Mom and Dad. Mom looked like she wanted to cry. Dad looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't figure out where to start. I didn't give him the chance. "You've made it pretty clear where I stand in this family," I said, grabbing my jacket off the back of the chair. "Thanks for clearing that up." Without waiting for a response, I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get out of there before I said something I couldn't take back. I ended up at Ellie's house. She opened the door, took one look at me, and sighed. "Let me guess, family drama?" "Big time," I muttered. She stepped aside, ushering me in. Within minutes, she handed me a cup of tea and sat across from me, her face full of the kind of empathy I hadn't felt for my own family in days. "What happened?" she asked. I didn't hold back. I gave her the whole story, every detail, every dig, every insult. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, and Ellie was shaking her head. "Sounds like they're stuck in their ways," she said bluntly. "Your sister's always been the golden child, and your parents don't know how to set boundaries with her." "Yeah, no kidding," I said bitterly. "But what am I supposed to do? Every time I stand up for myself, I'm the bad guy." Ellie nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're not going to change them overnight, Noah. Maybe not at all. But you can set boundaries for yourself. If they can't respect you, maybe it's time to take a step back." Her words made sense, too much sense. But that didn't make them hurt any less. The thought of distancing myself from my family felt like cutting off a part of myself. But what other choice did I have? When I got back to the house, the lights were dim, and the house was quiet. Mom was sitting in the living room, waiting for me. Her face was puffy, her eyes red like she'd been crying. "Noah," she said softly, looking up as I walked in. "Can we talk?" I hesitated but sat down across from her, bracing myself for another round of excuses, dismissals, and empty justifications. But what she said next caught me completely off guard. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry if we've made you feel like you don't matter. That was never our intention." I stared at her, my heart heavy. "Then why do you always take Harper's side? Why do you always take Harper's side?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. "Why do you let her treat me like I'm less important?" Mom sighed, her eyes dropping to the floor. "It's not about taking sides, Noah. Harper's complicated. She's always been so headstrong, and your father, well, he just wants to keep the peace. At my expense," I thought quietly, but I didn't say it. She didn't deny it. "I don't know how to fix this, Noah," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want us to be a family." "I want that too," I said, the words coming out softer than I wanted. "But it has to be a two-way street. I can't keep bending over backward while Harper gets everything she wants." Mom nodded, but there was a hollow look in her eyes, the kind that told me she didn't have an answer. And for the first time, I realized she probably never would. The breaking point came later that night. We were all sitting in the living room, me, Mom, Dad, Harper, and her kids, when Harper's husband, Ryan, finally showed up. He was tired but in a good mood, clearly oblivious to the storm brewing. Harper wasted no time pulling him into the conversation. "Noah is mad about the room," she said with a smirk, like she was telling a joke. "He thinks we should have consulted him before we turned it into a playroom." Ryan frowned, clearly confused. "Didn't we talk about that over a year ago? I thought everyone was on board." I whipped my head up, disbelief flooding me. "What?" Ryan blinked. "Yeah, Harper said she brought it up with you ages ago. She said you were fine with it." I stared at him, stunned. "She never talked to me about it." Harper avoided my gaze, her eyes suddenly glued to her phone like the screen was the only thing keeping her from meeting my eyes. "That never happened," I said slowly, my voice steady but sharp. "She never talked to me about it." Ryan turned toward Harper, realization dawning on his face. "Oh, well, that's awkward. You lied to him," I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "You lied to me, Harper." Harper shrugged, still refusing to look at me. "It's not like it would have changed anything." That was the moment the dam broke. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, fists clenched. "You know what? I'm done. If this is how you treat family, then maybe I'm better off without you." I stormed out of the house, leaving them stunned behind me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally taking control, not just of the situation, but of my future. I spent the night at a small motel a few miles from my parents' house. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in days, I could actually breathe. As I lay on the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about everything that had happened, the playroom, the letters, the lies. For years, I had tried to ignore the growing cracks in my relationship with my family, but now they were impossible to overlook. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them treat me like an afterthought anymore. If they couldn't respect me, I'd find my own way, with or without them. It was a painful realization, but also a freeing one. I drove back to the house to collect my things. The tension hit me the moment I walked in. Mom was in the kitchen, nervously wiping down the counters. Dad was sitting in the living room, pretending to read the paper like he couldn't feel the weight of the air around him. Harper. Ryan and Harper were nowhere to be seen, but I could hear the kids laughing as they watched cartoons in the playroom, the room that used to be mine. The sound was a bitter reminder of everything that had led to this moment. Mom looked up from the kitchen when she saw me. "Noah," she said cautiously, her voice tight with worry. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said curtly, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I just came to grab my stuff." Her face fell. "Noah, please don't do this. We can work this out." I shook my head, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. "I've tried, Mom. I've tried to talk to you, to Dad, to Harper. And all I get are excuses. I can't keep putting myself in this position." Her voice trembled as she said, "We don't want to lose you." "Then maybe you should have listened to me," I said quietly, my voice like a knife. "Instead of always siding with Harper." Her lips parted as if to respond, but I didn't wait. I walked past her, heading for the den where I'd been staying. I packed quickly, throwing my clothes into my bag and carefully placing the box of Sophia's letters on top. Every movement felt heavy, like I was packing away more than just my belongings, packing away the last scraps of hope I'd had for my family. As I zipped my bag shut, I heard footsteps in the doorway. Dad was standing there, his face unreadable. "You're really leaving?" he asked, his tone gruff. "I don't see any other choice," I said, slinging the bag over my shoulder. "You've made it pretty clear where I stand in this family." "That's not fair," he said, his voice rising slightly. "We've always supported you." "Have you?" I shot back, my voice sharp with years of pent-up frustration. "Because it feels like every time Harper and I clash, you take her side. You don't even listen to me. You just tell me to grow up and move on." Dad's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. But the look on his face told me he knew I was right. He stepped aside, and I walked past him toward the front door. Mom was there, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face, as if she knew this might be the last time she'd see me walk through that door. "Noah, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't leave like this." I hesitated, my heart aching in a way I hadn't expected. "I have to," I said, my voice trembling. "I love you, Mom. But I need to do this for myself." Her shoulders sagged as she stepped aside, and I walked out, letting the door close softly behind me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was choosing myself over my family. It was terrifying, like stepping into the unknown without a safety net, but it was also exhilarating, like I was finally breathing fresh air after being suffocated for years. As I drove away, I called Jack. He picked up on the first ring. "Noah," he said. "How's it going?" "I left," I said, my voice shaky. "Packed my stuff and left." There was a pause, and then Jack said, "Good for you, man. That takes guts." "I don't know if it's the right thing," I admitted, gripping the steering wheel. "But it feels like the only thing I can do right now." "It's definitely the right thing," Jack said firmly. "You've been putting up with their crap for way too long. It's about time you stood up for yourself." Hearing him say that made the knot in my chest loosen just a little. Jack had always been my voice of reason, and if he thought I was doing the right thing, maybe I wasn't as lost as I felt. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in ages, and even started therapy to work through the mess of feelings I had about my family. It wasn't easy. Every step forward felt like it came with a pang of guilt, a voice in the back of my head whispering that I'd abandoned them. Mom called a few times, leaving tearful voicemails asking me to come home. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. Harper, predictably, didn't reach out at all. Not a text, not a call, nothing. Dad called once, leaving a curt voicemail that sounded more like a to-do list than anything resembling concern. I didn't call him back. I wasn't ready to deal with him, and honestly, I wasn't sure I ever would be. The only person who seemed to truly understand what I was going through was Ellie. She checked in every now and then, her words always thoughtful and encouraging. She reminded me that it was okay to prioritize myself, even if it felt unnatural after years of bending over backward for my family. Her support meant more than I could ever express. About a month after I left, I got a text from Harper. "K, I heard you're mad at everyone. Hope you're enjoying the drama." I stared at the message, my blood boiling. My fists clenched around my phone, but instead of firing off the response she deserved, I took a deep breath. Slowly, I typed back, "I'm not mad. I'm just done." She didn't reply. The real turning point came when I found an apartment closer to work. It was small, a little run-down, but it was mine. The first space I could truly call my own. Jack and a few friends helped me move in, and we spent the weekend hauling furniture, eating takeout on the floor, and laughing like kids again. After everyone left, I sat alone in the middle of the mess, surrounded by boxes, and pulled out the one marked Sophia's letters. I hadn't looked at them since I left my parents' house. Sitting on the floor, I read them one by one. The nostalgia was bittersweet, memories of who I used to be and how much I'd changed. But as I read, something unexpected happened. It didn't hurt anymore. One letter stood out. It was from the summer after we graduated, and in it, Sophia had written, "No matter what happens, always remember your worth. Don't let anyone make you feel small, not even the people you love." Her words hit me like a wave, bringing tears to my eyes. She'd seen my struggles even back then, long before I understood them myself. Years later, her words were the reminder I didn't know I needed. 2 months after I left, my phone buzzed with a call from my mom. For the first time, I answered. "Noah," she said, her voice tentative, careful. "How are you?" "I'm okay," I said honestly. "Better than I've been in a while." "I'm glad," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "I miss you." "I miss you too," I admitted. "But I needed this, Mom. I needed to figure out who I am outside of all that." "I understand," she said softly. There was a pause, then, "I'm sorry, Noah. For everything. We didn't handle things the way we should have." Her apology felt genuine, and for a moment, I just let it sink in. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." We talked for a while, about my new apartment, her garden, the kids. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. By the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Maybe one day we could rebuild. As for Harper, I haven't spoken to her since the day I left. I don't know if we'll ever be close again, and honestly, I'm okay with that. She made her choices, and I've made mine. What I've learned through all of this is that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect. And if you can't get that from the people who are supposed to love you the most, it's okay to walk away. For the first time in years, I feel free.